Want to welcome you to Product Coffee. My name is Jason Brett, and today we're starting a brand new series on value propositions and marketing strategies. And we're going to today, we're going to just have a group discussion about value propositions and what it looks like to identify and define those value propositions, how you test that wording, as Ira was talking about a moment ago, and when do you need to revitalize that value prop as well around your core offer. So we are really excited to have you here. Let's get started with the discussion. I want to just kind of tee it up and kind of get things started with just asking you to tell me a little bit, what does a compelling value proposition mean to you in the first place? Why is it critical for product success? Would love some thoughts on that. Just raise your virtual hand, hit the using the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. But the first person gets to just jump right in. I know we got some folks. Jeff, you and I talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So for me, I think the importance of the value proposition is to make sure that everyone in the company understands what you're providing to your customers. So it's one thing to say, the mission or the vision of the company is X, right? And that's great, but that's separate from what are you actually providing to your customers. Obviously, those have to be cohesive in some way, but I do feel like sometimes people get caught up in their value proposition being the mission or the vision of the company. And again, there are probably some examples out there of people who have done it really well where that's all basically right the same thing. But I tend to think not. Even if you think about Google, right, organizing the world, right, sort of mission, vision kind of statements are very different than sort of the value, right, the value proposition. So that's kind of where I would start.
I love that. That's a great start. Anybody else have anything you want to add to that? Let's see, Scott, go for it.
Hey, yeah. So the way I think about it is your prospective customers have a problem they're trying to solve, whether or not you exist, whether or not your company exists, whether or not your product exists. And when you're building something, you are proposing that what you've built is valuable to them in helping them solve the problem they're trying to solve. That's the frame. It's anchor on what they care about and why it's good for them. And then you come up with some idea and you propose that your solution is good for them. Value proposition.
Love it. Quentin.
One way that I love to put it is to say it's a 3-sentence story that tells exactly why you do it, how you do it, and like your how you do it. So what, how, and why is 3 sentences. It tells the story. It's easy to remember, and it will click for everyone around.
Cool. I like all of those. I think my simplest way of thinking of a compelling value proposition for me is the simple story of why the product that I'm working on, why the product that I'm bringing to market is going to be valuable to my intended market. And there are the complex parts that we've talked about that we just kind of mentioned what some of those are. But I wonder if Jeff, you gave a little bit of an example. But so and Quentin, I like how you kind of broke it down into some very specific components of a strong value proposition in terms of the story. You said it was the what we're doing, the why we're doing, and the how we're doing, right? And there are some other components that I think come into play from a value prop definition perspective. So there's the words that you use, and then there's the concept of the value proposition as well. I know one of the ways that I have thought about it over the years, and there's a lot of writing out there on this as well. Is you have that customer need, and then coupled to that customer need, you've got there are reasons that that need is not being met. And There are things that are in their way, and people use the language of the need and the pain and the gain. And that pain is, why is their life not good because they can't meet that need? And the gain is, how is their life better when they can? How does your product improve their life, or how can your product improve their life? So let's see here. I don't want to double mic that. So that's kind of a little bit of some of the pieces that I have thought about and kind of learned about and tried to think about through the product lens along the way. But I wonder how many of you, just by show of hands, just by large show of hands, how many of you have been involved in formally defining a value proposition along the way in your career? Throw those hands up there. Got a handful, a few of them. Toshi, Denise, Jackie. So I would love to have some conversation about the process that you've gone through to do that. Would anybody like to kind of talk through and kind of share with the community how you go through that process? Toshi, great.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
So defining value prop is kind of core to what we do. We're a brand strategy and digital marketing firm. And so we are often not in conversation with the product side. The irony of that is not lost on me. What we do is we workshop it, right? So I will have very, very long conversations with the CEO about the product offering, about the competitive advantage. And we kind of do stream of consciousness thinking, and we have them work really hard to describe it in their own words. And a lot of times they really struggle to get that language out. And sometimes this takes between 2 1.5 hour sessions if they can handle it. And we try to create, if we can, pillars and put all their ideas in buckets. And then we break those buckets out into exactly what Quentin said. Our value prop should be what we do, how we do it, who for, and why we do it. And if we can get one short, pithy sentence that says all of those things in those 2 sessions, we've succeeded.
One short, pithy sentence. So is the sentence the value proposition, or is the value proposition something that is just encapsulated by the sentence?
I think it's the sentence, because what we work it into is sort of like a brand architecture. So they have a brand promise, which is usually just a statement. Mm-hmm. They have differentiators, and then underneath those differentiators are just for like either one word or a phrase. And then a value proposition that encapsulates all those things I just described. And underneath that, we have brand pillars. And those pillars are effectively what the company can stand on.
Excellent. Jackie, what was the process that you've used? What does that process look like for you?
Sure. So what I've done in my own product career, and since teaching other people how to do this in their own coaching and consulting businesses, I like to use the Jeffrey Moore's statement from his book, Crossing the Chasm, which I can place in the chat for everyone to see. But essentially, it's I'll just read it for you guys. So you basically just fill in these blanks. I was just pulling it up. So for target customers who have then you state the need or opportunity, and then you say this product is in this product category that has this key benefit or compelling reason to buy. And here's easier to read there. And then, like Toshi said, I like to also take it a step further. So then it's how you do it. So you explain how you do it, and then you write out why you do it. And the why is really, as a company, like what, if the company was a person, what gets you up in the morning? Like, why are you getting up in the morning every day to work on this? And like, you can think about that individually, as a individual contributor in a company, but you can also think about it from a company perspective. So tying all those things together, and then that naturally, we have to think about this from product marketer perspective, that naturally evolves into your product messaging and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Tiago's kind of plus oneing on the crossing the chasm. And one of the things that I love about that, more gives that as a positioning statement, but it has so many functional uses because it does represent a value proposition. It also, if you put it in the future tense, when your product isn't yet achieving what it's what you intend for it to achieve, that same positioning statement can become the foundation for a product vision, a product vision communication as well. So it's got such multiple uses. It's a powerful template to help you think through the core components. Even if when you're done with that exercise, you reword the whole thing to reflect your brand in a little bit different way, it makes sure that you've checked on everything. And I see that Scott's dropping some great stuff into the chat. And we've also got your hand up, Scott. So jump on in here.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is going in a direction that's not useful, but you asked about sort of the process of how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share an example from like a dozen years ago in the B2B2C space of the how we get there. Is it kosher to share my screen?
Yeah. Let me open it up for you here.
Cool.
Just a minute.
Let's see, it's going to be this screen.
Go for it. Yep.
Okay, so I did a quick scan to make sure I didn't have customer info in here. So I was working with a client where customers were airlines and their customers are passengers, of course. And so is this text big enough to be like readable for anyone?
Let's see. I'm seeing. Are you able to? Can you share that to the live stream as well? Great, thanks. Yeah, I can read that.
Okay, great. So what this is a pivot table of pulling together an analysis of how airlines make money. And then using that as a backdrop to say, what can we do that helps them make more money? And at the time, what I was building out was what I called a value lever model. I had no idea that there's a value driver tree that exists at the time. So I basically kind of recreated value driver trees, which are, big three consulting firm things. But like looking at the notion of airlines make more money when they increase the number of customers. One way to do that is increase market share within a servable market. One way to do that is improving customer acquisition, changing the schedule to make it more profit optimal, like improving your catchment of people that are trying to book travel, managing your inventory level. And basically, like this builds out pretty deeply. And I keep closing the things because I'm not sure if there's customer stuff inside there, but I don't think there is. To build a model to say, where should we play and what are the relative magnitudes, right? So this pivot table is just sort of a roll up that helped people from ideation point of view, people boot up into the space, that sort of thing. But when we get into the greater details, it's how much of your revenue is coming from passengers, how much is coming from previous premium passengers, how much money do you make selling frequent flyer tickets, how do you reduce cost of operations in terms of like costs during regular operations or irregular, like when there's a storm and flights get canceled or equipment breaks, stuff like that. And so basically it's part of that process of getting to a value prop is building an understanding of what your customers care about, how they make money, and what you could do that makes them better at making money. So like it's very wonky stuff, but it was the process.
Hey, that's a brilliant example. I am so thankful that you shared that. If you go back and look at it in a little bit, Scott, and see that there's something that you want us to blur out or anything in the final cut, let me know. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it looked like it was good. I did a quick scan as I tracked it down.
Yeah, we can absolutely do some edits if we need to. We'll fix it in post. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really, really good, rich stuff. There was a really interesting conversation going on in the chat, and I would love to talk about it here. And this, by the way, folks, is why you sign up for the Zoom call. It looks like we've got some problems with the live stream today, so this is not streaming out to the world. So you guys are the only ones that are seeing this today. So make sure that you're on our mailing list at productcoffee.com if you're not already, and you'll always get the invitation to sign up for the Zoom and join us live, just in case the stream doesn't work. So let's see here. It is, but there's a conversation here, Tiago. I want to put you on the spot a little bit because I think it was a great conversation around the difference between vitamin and painkiller, and kind of how that affects how you go about how it might affect how you go about communicating or thinking about your value prop. And then there was a little bit of debate about that. I'd love to recreate that for the benefit of everybody who's watching the replay.
Sure. I'm not sharing video, not because of my bad hair. It's not a bad hair day. I'm just in a very busy area in the office and I couldn't get out of the room.
No worries.
But it all boils down to it depends on the difficulties the user is having, right? So when you think about value proposition, is how do you want to influence or affect the user's life and the user's interaction with the product? Is this product going to enhance something that they kind of got under control? So it's more like a vitamin, right? It's just making things better. It's giving you a little better quality of life. Or is it a painkiller? It's something that you cannot do and you need to have some leverage. You need to have some help to complete your tasks, right? So Jackie just brought up like a great point by crossing the chasm. Is one of my like favorite books about product management. Actually, there's a cool story about that I can share with you offline about reading that book and my way back into my current job, which is interesting. But it's really like using that template and how you're going to position that. The point I think it was Toshi that made, like really addressing your target audience as well, right? Who you are solving things for. So with the painkiller and vitamin analogy, it's something that we usually ask 4 questions here: is what type of problem are we solving? Who are we solving them for? Right? How we are going to measure success, and really like, is it really a vitamin or a painkiller? Is it going that will only enhance what they already do, or is it something that will enable them to do something that they weren't unable to do before? I think answering these 4 questions, the painkiller and vitamin can give you the why, right? Why are you doing this? Oh, people just can't get stuff done. Yep. So that's my take on how to put this together with all the value propositions when you're pitching a new product, when you are releasing a new, or when you are experimenting with a new feature in your product.
Very, very cool. Thanks. And then there were some other perspectives on that as well, if anybody wants to kind of jump in. So yeah, I really love. Would you repeat one more time, Tiago, those kind of four components that you just talked through?
Yeah, what problem are we solving? Who are we solving this problem for? How are we going to measure success? And is it a vitamin or a painkiller? Or you can change it like to why are we doing this? Right? Because the vitamin painkiller is really part of the why. Why are you doing this? Are you think this is something cool that is going to improve things, or is something that if you don't have it, nobody can do anything?
Perfect. Love it. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to kind of comment on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. It's interesting. I think so having come from a company with a compliance-driven product compliance-driven value proposition, right? It was much more in the painkiller, right? Here's a several 100-page document about these new accounting rules. And so on top of your existing job, please figure out how you incorporate, right, all of this massive headache for accountants. And so right? The solution was definitely in the vitamin sort of category. I'm sorry, in the aspirin category, not the vitamin. And I think later on we got into some additional vitamins, right? Like we add AI in. Well, guess what? That's not maybe a painkiller, but that helps you do it a little bit better, right? That's an additional value proposition. So now if you're trying to sell that in, that's a vitamin maybe on top of the aspirin. But for me, that's just, I've always seen that as if you know you're selling aspirin, it's just easier to come up with the value proposition because that person has it, right? They have a headache, they are in pain, and they know that, right, buying that product or taking that aspirin will fix it right away, as opposed to, hey, I don't feel well. Hey, great, take vitamins, right? At some point in time, that might help. So it just feels like you might need to, if you're a vitamin, you might need to spend more time honing your value proposition and maybe I like what Tiago said about establishing the measurement, right? Like how can you measure whether it's valuable? You might need to be a little bit more specific and help customers understand where that value, how you might measure the improvement, right, of a vitamin. But it's more that, right, is it easier or is it harder to me, not sort of anything else.
So one of the things that I was taught very early in the sales career, and a lot of product people come up maybe on the technical side or existing products, but on the sales side, I always found the value props to be the sales side, which was not only the feature, not only the benefit, but the benefit to you. And people are mentally very lazy to extrapolate what the feature is, vitamin B, what the value is, or maybe I should have said vitamin C because I don't know what vitamin B does. Vitamin C keeps you from getting scurvy to benefit to you. Now imagine that since you don't eat healthy, this vitamin is going to prevent you from having scurvy on your long boat ride. People never make that third jump, whether it's a sunroof or vitamin or a feature in a software set, and customers don't. Back to your legal research, compliance, tax thing. People don't extrapolate what the value of AI was bringing in that case. It's a buzzword. So sell it. Say, hey, now you can ask natural language questions that pulls up the right regulatory response to streamline your work. And
Right.
you have to teach that to your internal sales team, your marketing group, and sell that to the clients that you're meeting with. And so many people just say, hey, we have AI, we have vitamin C, and we have this third thing. And clients just go, okay, great. But they don't know. They don't know that value at all. It seems like they should, but they don't.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It was kind of one of the points that I was going to ask for a discussion on. I think you just kind of encapsulated it really well. Is AI in and of itself a value proposition, or how do you really communicate the value proposition that AI brings to the table when that makes sense in your product? I see, Aaron, you've got your hand up. I want to welcome you in.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jason. I chimed in on Tiago's conversation in the chat because I'd heard that analogy before. As I said, it was Chris Barton, the founder of Shazam. It was a podcast episode. He was interviewed by Tony Robbins. Worth checking out if you find it. It was really interesting how he came up with Shazam and how he developed it and how it went from, obviously zero to billions of dollars worth. And he worked at Dropbox and Google as well. Really, really clever guy. But I think he was talking about the framing of using the painkiller versus vitamin. I'm over the other side of the pond.
We can go with it. We're global.
We're talking about framing it in terms of the urgency versus longevity of your product. So a painkiller, there is an immediacy. Your customer needs your product now, and there's a very clear need and the value proposition and trade-off, the value exchange there. But once you've relieved that pain, you don't need the painkiller anymore.
Right.
So it's very, very important. Your product is very important for a very short period of time. Whereas if you can sell a vitamin to people, they can buy that day after day after day for years, for decades. So as a business model, then that's got more longevity and potentially could make more revenue over a longer period of time. But also, just another quick thing, Bo just reminded me, my background was actually is sales and business development. And then I got into marketing that way, and now product marketing. So whereas I realize a lot of people in product marketing have been very much product centric. But I think that what I've learned from sales is you can't replace the conversations that you have with customers. And we were forced with Acclaim Ideas before we were acquired. It was called Solverboard, and it was a tech startup. We hadn't developed the product, so we had to go out and test the value proposition of the product before we built it. And so we did a huge number of customer interviews, chatting with them and asking them, really, what are your challenges? What do you find difficult? What makes it so hard to be an innovation manager? And if we came up with a product that addressed those challenges, would you be interested in buying? And it was kind of like we'd be able to test our proposed value proposition. And that was really, really important for two things. One was it was great, obviously, lead generate, demand gen before we got ready to launch and got people excited and sign up for early access, etc. But we were surprised by some of the things that people said that they found difficult. Once you started uncovering that and really digging into that, there were other more important things that we realized that weren't obvious when we first started that process. So yeah, I would certainly recommend people speaking directly to the customers as much as physically possible users.
Absolutely. That's great insight. And I'm going to circle back around to you to kind of go a little bit one click deeper on that topic in just a minute, Aaron. But I see Laurie's got her hand up, so I want to jump over to her real quick.
Well, the one thing that I was going to add, and we can table this and come back to it if you want to keep going on that thread, Jeff, but the one thing that continues to jump out at me is the absolute criticality of clearly and succinctly being able to state your value proposition, because this is the foundation of all of your product marketing moving forward, right? And you may have to start the articulation of the value prop internally in order to get the funding and the green light to begin to go ahead, but that's going to need to continue through into your market. And if you can't do that succinctly and clearly, like we're talking about in the thread with AI, like it's AI, who cares, right? That should be part of your litmus test and should be an indication that you maybe need to reconsider.
Yep. That's a great call. Absolutely. I see Quentin. Go ahead and jump on in here as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something before it jumps out of my head, but I think one thing with the value proposition too is when you're working with employees and you're working with a team, having everyone on the same page is so important. And if you can get that value proposition down to something that everyone will remember, which is part of the story, and it's short and sweet, it really helps your whole team be on the same page. When you're talking to customers, it's the right thing is being said, and it's so much easier to have a good hook when you have a good value proposition that everyone understands.
One of the biggest jobs and responsibilities of product managers outside of the product itself is just creating alignment, ensuring that there is alignment across the organization about why a product is important, why we're doing what we're doing, how we're doing it, when we're going to do it, making sure that the entire organization is on the exact same page. And that's a really hard part of the job. And you summed that up really well, Quentin. Thank you. Ira.
Yeah, exactly on what Quentin said. I just have a funny story to share from last week.
Great.
So I got a client who came for designs, right? They asked us to do the pitch deck. And we did a pitch deck. Before that, we talked like for 2 weeks with founder and like his main sponsor. What would be the value proposition? What would be that messaging to put on the first page? So we come up with it, put it on the first page. Then I send this pitch deck. Then they start sending this pitch deck to all other members I was not even aware of, right? It was like 8 different board members, CMO, and like all those people. And then they start to give their like feedback on that. And they all start thinking, like giving me the different sentences on that first page, right? And they ask it like, change this sentence, like it's a little design thing, right? And I see that every person, like literally 10 people, put the different value on that, right? Very different. It was a fitness app. We had like a fitness app that pays you back. They were like, earn crypto, engage with your influencers, with your favorite athletes. Absolutely different messaging. So I just realized that, okay, this is not moving anywhere. And I get everyone on board and like pasted all those like sentences that they said, they sent me like just to as a design update. And I said like, okay, this is like each of this sentence is a different MVP, it's a different value proposition. Like we cannot move forward with this even if it's a design.
Yep.
So yeah, just a quick example on how important it's to like get it all together. Because if we would move forward with that sentence that like no one approved and all those team members that I was not even aware of, I don't know like where we would get with it. So just a quick example.
Yep. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great story. All right, Toshi.
So just a quick question, because all of this is amazing and fascinating since I'm on the brand side. I do this like for companies that are way later. I've had a couple companies ask for a specific framework, and it's a really hard one, and I'm not sure where it comes from. It is just like, a fill in the blanks sort of like, section. It is for, and I think that is probably users, right?
Mhm.
Who,
Mm-hmm.
something, and want
Mm-hmm.
the product or the service is maybe the only thing or the one thing that does something, unlike competitors, our product or we this. And I've had a pharma company ask for this, and I've had a telecom company ask for this, like very specifically this framework.
Mm-hmm.
We do the workshop. It's so hard for stakeholders to get their head around that thing, but it is really product centric. And it also brings the competitive aspect into it, because sometimes I work with brands that are like after merger and acquisition. So like they have established competitors. And so like, I love this framework, but I'm wondering if anybody else has ever heard of it or anything like that and what their experiences have been with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the value proposition framework from Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. And I think, but that's exactly it. And that the value of that framework is it was created to write a positioning statement, to think about how you're going to kind of go through your go-to-market and the evolution of your product in the market. And we have used that a lot, both from helping to define a value proposition to helping to kickstart a discussion around product vision. I think Scott in the chat a moment ago was just commenting that we're talking both about value propositions and positioning at the same time, and there's tons of overlap. There absolutely is, and it's easy to slip back and forth between those conversations. So Scott, what I'm wondering is, from your comment, is that a problem or just a fact and an awareness component?
I don't know there's a problem. I think it's just the positioning conversations happen after you have a product. The value proposition ideation things happen before you have a product. And so like we're hitting on the same points, but we're doing different things with that same area of information. So it's just the conversation is great either way. I just didn't know if we were trying to keep it in one direction or another.
Right. So I think that's kind of the takeaway from the conversation is you kind of have the same general set of concepts and ways of breaking apart the value you're going to create or the value that you have created and how you're delivering that value. And they are so closely related. The value proposition side of it and the vision side of it is the work that you do before, and the proposition, and then the positioning is where did we actually land? What is it that we've actually brought to the table? Denise, you've got your hand up.
Hi, I did, but you both, you and Scott both may have just answered the question, because I was waiting, and then when I think it was Lori that just asked it about having the unlike and having that differentiator or how we do it different. We do that on the back end, or try really hard, but it is mushing it together. But we have, so I guess I was about to ask how many people were adding that to their what, why, how, and then doing, and how it's different, from others, because that's that's what I try to also do. And when I was hearing not a lot of people mentioning it, I was like, okay, but I see the blend there.
Very good. Excellent. Tiago.
Yeah, so really quick on the positioning versus or value and value proposition overlap. I think one interesting thing is when you build a value proposition and then you deliver something, and then that thing is not really achieving its goals, and then you realize that you need to position in a different way to make it really a winner, or you figure out that what you build is it's something else, right? So I completely agree with Scott when he says that like this, it's cyclical, right? You're going to keep reevaluating things all over the place. And that's why I put something on the chat. There's a book called Obviously Awesome by April Dunford, which is like, she's also one of my faves. And she talks a lot about positioning and really like one example that she worked with that is in the book is about a company that had a great value proposition and they had a great product, but that product was not selling. And the reason for that product not selling is that they positioned that product the wrong way. So they had to revisit that and then tying things back and doing this continuous analysis is what we all should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that the product marketing manager is our best friend. So if you work with one, make sure that you are always in touch with them because they will help you on the positioning while you are fulfilling the value prop.
Really well said. Thank you, Tiago. So I want to, and there's a lot of great stuff in the chat here. It'll be in the notes document after the fact as well. And that'll be available to our premium members forever, even if you weren't on the call live today. But I do want to take a slight twist on this conversation for the next few minutes. And Aaron, a moment ago, you were talking about some of the activities that you went through at a super high level. You were talking about the fact that you tested your value proposition with a lot of customers. And one of the things that I wanted to dig into is that exact notion of testing out the value proposition and how do you actually go about validating value prop? And that's more than just talking to customers. I think it's, there's some specific methods that people use, and I'd really be interested in what methods you found effective for testing and validating that with your target audience. Specifically, how do you measure and know that you've got the right value proposition in the first place as you're testing it? And I wonder if I can pick on you, Aaron, since you were kind of talking through some of your experiences. I'd love to start with you if you've got some specific answers. If not, we'll look for some hands and some folks to jump in.
Yeah, I think the key thing is not to take it personally. Always be scrutinizing. This is never perfect. It's always going to be evolving. And I think somebody was saying about making sure all stakeholders are aligned on the value proposition. They understand it, the essence of why you're creating the product and what it is you're trying to achieve. I think Bo was talking about it again, was with the sales side of things, is it's not about the benefits. The benefits benefit. And I always used to think, so what? Put myself in the position. Don't be sort of don't give into sort of vanity over this product and think it's the most amazing thing. Scrutinize it. So what? It does this. Yeah, but so what? So that it can enable a customer to do what? Yeah, but so what? Just put yourself in the most belligerent customer you could possibly ever have.
Yeah.
And that will just keep testing that value proposition to breaking point. There's a few things that we did when we were just doing marketing campaigns and trying different things. I think someone in the chat mentioned the fake door demand test, putting a landing page or A/B testing landing pages with different headlines or different value propositions, I suppose. There's so many different variables and factors which can affect that. So that's the difficulty, is isolating that and going, oh, this didn't work because the value proposition is wrong. It might not be. It might be various other factors. But I think that the more activity you do, the more you either reinforce your confidence in the value proposition, or it chips away, and eventually you can spot weaknesses and go, it's not quite right. It's not quite there. And one last thing also is the fact that it changes over time. So one thing that we found was a really good value proposition at the time was not just another idea management platform. Because at the time, there were a lot of platforms coming out, and that they were just saying, this is the best way to manage your ideas. And we were trying, and I mean, this then overlaps, and again, talk about this in the chat, the sort of Venn diagram where it overlaps with positioning, and how you position yourself in the market. But then that hinges on the value proposition. So they go hand in hand. That's just my sort of immediate thoughts on that.
Fantastic. Thanks. So who else? We've got quite a few people who have been through this process. And one of the things that I really want to tease out here is, how do I know when I've got it right? I love the notion, and I think it's a really valuable notion, whether I love it or not, of kind of keep going with the so what to really pressure test it. How do you know explicitly we're there? We have the value proposition that we think is going to be successful. How are you measuring that success?
You're putting that back to me.
I think I can bring it back to you. If you've got a good answer, I'm looking for some voices on it.
Just checking there was silence there. I was just thinking,
I've been told I need to let silence happen a little bit more than I do. So,
Jason, that's the art of product management. Is when a product is successful, is that because product uncovered a need, timing, luck, engineering built it well, marketing sold it well, a salesperson had a relationship with a large client? Value props to me are very hard to measure how effective they truly are, because it's one of 1,000 components that go into the success of a product. I think it's easier to say when you miss the mark, it's not going to be successful, because you truly have to understand, and Aaron was talking about it, and why one client bought it sometimes is not the reason another client bought it. So I lump that in the art side. I love your 60-second business case. It's revenue, it's customer satisfaction, it's cost containment. But then I added a column for product management priority, and that is the art side. You've got to know the market. It's kind of like product manager is the expert opinion. Like, opinion is not allowed on the witness stand unless you're an expert. That's what you have to be of the market, and that's what you have to have confidence in. To me, if you guys have a way to measure it, let me know. But it definitely would be tough.
Scott.
I was going to say let Jeff go first because I've already talked too much, but I would like to throw a couple ideas in the mix.
Okay. So Jeff, and then we'll come back to Scott.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of how to measure, I agree with Bo. It's definitely, I think to an extent, this is where it is the art and science. But I do think depending on where you are in your evolution, right? So if you're at the 0 to 1 stage and you're testing value proposition, whether or not you can get a meeting set by saying, this is my value proposition, and they say, yes, I'd like to talk about that, right? Like, that's an easy way to say I've hit the mark or not. Obviously, there's also, you may have spammed a bunch of people on LinkedIn that are the wrong people. So there's obviously lots of ways the messaging, right, can go awry. But I think, right, that's one. Maybe later in your evolution, it might be if I'm trying to ask for someone to give me a review on G2 or Capterra, and I say, hey, do you agree that this is the value we provide? Would you be willing to talk about that? Right? That might be a place to measure, like, yes, they like your product because it does this thing for them. So I think there are ways where you can get some sense of, do we have the right thing or not, in terms of describing our value proposition.
I think absolutely. I think the fake door test is a really good example. And for those who didn't hear it when somebody brought it up a minute ago, that's the notion of you literally publish a landing page or an entry door, what appears to be a door to purchase a product that is represented by your value proposition. And then people come in and you say, well, it's not ready yet, but you can sign up on a waiting list for it or something like that. But that kind of gives you can run some advertising against that. So you can kind of get it out there to a large audience and find out if that's landing, if that proposition is landing. But this also goes back to what we talked about on the workshop last week as well. There's this line, and I know Martin was asking about product market fit earlier. And one of the things that so often I have heard used incorrectly is I've heard people talk about, hey, we think we've got product market fit.
We lost your sound, Jason. You got muted.
Just to unmute. There we go.
There you
okay.
Go. You're back.
What was the last thing we heard?
They think they have product market fit.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. So yeah, they think they have product market fit, but they don't yet have a product. And I think that's where the line between we've got a good value proposition that we've tested and which we can do before we have a product. And then we can know that that value proposition was good when we've actually proven product market fit, when we know we've got product market fit. But ultimately, what we're talking about with the value proposition discussion is de-risking the investment to get to product market fit. With that being said, at least that's the perspective I've been kind of noodling on for the last several days as we've been talking about this topic. But Scott, you had some other points you wanted to bring up, and I want to bring you back to the front.
Thank you. Yeah. So a couple of things when I think about the measuring stuff, I think in two buckets: lagging indicators and leading indicators.
Mm-hmm.
And you open with the question of how do you know if your value prop was a success? And it depends on what you mean by success. So if I say a financial success for the business, that's in the lagging indicator camp. That's exactly what Bo was talking about, or what I think Bo was talking about. And it's hard to tease out the variables of did I have an awesome sales rep, or was did the competitor stumble or whatever. But I don't anchor on those measures as much because they lag. And so it's hard to use them as a good course correction tool. Right. I'm proposing something's valuable. Let me change. And so then I really live, at least for me, in the leading indicator camp, which is more like where Jeff was, and sort of the experimental design of what do I look for that tells me if I'm on the track, if I'm on track. And the way I always frame it is starting with the question, because inside your value proposition, you're assuming you've picked the right customer. You've assuming you've picked the right problem to solve for them. And you've assumed a solution approach that's going to work. And you've assumed that you executed well on that approach. Any one of those can be wrong. And so to know if your value prop is working, I start with the question of, if it works, what would be different? What would change as a result of you successfully solving the right problem for the right people? And use that as your guide to measurement. So, I mean, and it could be things like, are you willing to post a review for me? It could be, we're getting a higher conversion rate, or people are dropping out of the funnel later in the funnel, or like whatever it is. They're all different kinds of behavioral things, but those are leading indicators that give you the fastest possible feedback. And you can't isolate all the variables, but it isolates as many as I know how to isolate. Mm-hmm. So I think it was just really great what Bo and Jeff both said. And I put all of that stuff in those two buckets for me.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Quentin.
So I really like the idea of breaking it down into different buckets. And I think if you go with who it's for, why, and how you do it, the why is kind of hard to do to measure, because it's kind of emotional. Okay, your customer is going to pick it off the shelf because this is your why. But when it comes to your who and your value proposition, you can also detail exactly who, like, your buyer persona is, where you say, we're selling this financial software for people who are unsatisfied with this current solution. And so that enables you to really tailor it down and say, okay, are you dissatisfied with this solution? And then if you say how you're going to do it, that's also a way to test it by saying, would this solve your situation? And to Scott's point, that's kind of how you can do it. So I really agree with breaking it down, doing the different buckets and really testing. There's one question that I would ask the group. How do you feel about the idea that value proposition can change over time? I'm in the startup world. We change the value proposition all the time. We're iterating, we're sending a new MVP, it's constant. In a more static way, in the corporate world, what do you think of that?
That's a great question. It's actually kind of where I wanted to go to kind of land the plane on today's discussion. So thank you for asking it that way, Quentin. So it's where do we feel, how do we, is a value proposition a static concept that doesn't change, or is it something that evolves over time? I see that Toshi threw her hand up right away, so I'd love to get Toshi's take on that.
So when we get brought into an enterprise, it's usually because lots of stuff has happened and their value prop is stale. So their marketing isn't working. They've had lots of acquisitions. They've have like tons of stakeholders. They've got lots of people there's tons of churn. And so internally, if you interview 6 stakeholders, like right at the beginning of your engagement, and they can't really tell you what value prop is anymore, that means it's gone and they've lost it. And so the whole group has to come together. Everybody has to workshop again, what do we actually do? And after 3 or 4 acquisitions, that can be tough. And so we start internally. We ask everybody what really they think the value is. And then they sort of have to hash it out and really figure out what the value is. And then we go out into the world and test it in lots of ways that everybody here has described to make sure that that's actually what's happening. And that's where those user interviews and win-loss comes into play.
Great perspective. Jeff, you are right on our heels.
Yeah, I just think as the company evolves, unless you are really, really specific, right? As you evolve and you add a second product, right? Certainly acquisitions, like Toshi's point, is well received. If you're taking 2 companies together, it's like the chocolate and peanut butter Reese's thing, right? Like, okay, chocolate's got a value prop, so does peanut butter, but now when you put them together, that has to change. There has to be some evolution, unless you think it's just now I solve 2 problems for you. But again, if you're trying to sell them as a thing, right, you've got to do that. So I think the multi-product or acquisition is a place where, yes, right, and ideally that there's a hypothesis before the acquisition. A PE firm or someone will certainly have that, right? A hypothesis is our value will be this once we acquire this company or once we merge these companies together.
Excellent. And then I saw one more hand up there. I saw Denise.
Hey, I am on the vote of it is not static. It's not static for us. I'm in healthcare IT. And as we continue to solve more problems and other problems happen in the industry and we, weave around, the message changes. And so we need to stay on top of that and understand when we are able to solve a different problem. So it changes. Even we're pulling back now to redo something right now and how we're solving and giving value and understanding the value that we really are providing, because it's a little different than it was 6 months ago. So right. It's good to know and reevaluate, not static.
Cool. Thank you. And Joel, I think we got time for one more. So Joel, I see you're here. Good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Jason. I would say if you're in a company where you're a product manager, you're there because the company is evolving, right? If the company wasn't evolving, they probably wouldn't need a product manager. And as such, your value prop will change by that dynamic because you're either succeeding or failing, right? If you're failing, if you're not hitting your value prop, if it isn't having the success that you once thought it would, then you probably need to move on to some other value prop. On the flip side, if you've succeeded and you brought out the greatest thing ever and everybody's buying it like crazy, that's only going to last so long. So you should, as a product manager, you're probably on to that next thing.
Yep. So I think that's a great way to end the conversation today. I think so the question as to whether a value proposition is static or not, I think we kind of are in agreement that it certainly can evolve over time. And as markets evolve, as customers evolve, as how we solve the problem evolves, even in the same product, it can change. It is fluid. And then there's also the notion that Toshi talked about a lot of, even if the value proposition itself hasn't fundamentally changed, the awareness and the understanding of it grows stale over time if you're not careful as well. So you've got both the value proposition can change, but also the need to refresh the understanding of it internally to make sure that you're maintaining that alignment. So that brings us to the top of the hour for today. I do want to tease out for everyone who's still here at the end of this month on the 29th, I think it is, on March 29th, we're going to be doing our next workshop. And he's not here with us today, but Devin Smith, who is one of our regulars, is with Podium Studios as well, and does a lot of work around jobs to be done and product management consulting as well. Devin is going to be leading a workshop on actually defining and communicating your value proposition for your product, for your organization. So we're going to go really deep, not just on the theoretical discussions we've had today, but the how-tos and going really deep on how to define and communicate that value proposition at the end of the month. So watch your inbox for the invitation to that workshop. And we'll be back next week at 7:30 a.m. Eastern. We will see you at Product Copy next week. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.